In the early months of 1942, the world trembled under the thunder of Japanese victory. Just 6 months earlier, the attack on Pearl Harbor had shattered the illusion of American invincibility. In less than 2 hours, Japan's planes turned battleships into burning hulks, destroyed hundreds of aircraft, and left the mighty Pacific Fleet crippled. The rising sun had ascended, and across Asia and the Pacific, one island after another fell to the Empire of Japan. Singapore, the Philippines, Hong Kong, Malaya, each surrendered with shocking speed. For the first time in modern history, the Western powers were on the defensive. Japan's admirals believed destiny was on their side. They saw their empire stretching across the Pacific, a barrier of conquered islands guarding the Japanese homeland. But behind the smoldering ruins of Pearl Harbor, a wounded giant was awakening. America had been caught off guard, but not destroyed. Factories in Detroit, Chicago, and Los Angeles roared to life. Within weeks, shipyards worked day and night, assembling aircraft carriers, destroyers, and planes faster than Japan could imagine. And among those aircraft, one name began to echo through the skies: the Douglas SBD Dauntless. It was not fast, it was not glamorous, but it would soon become the deadliest dive bomber in the Pacific. Meanwhile, Japan celebrated. Its leaders believed America had lost the will to fight. Admiral Isoroku Yamamoto, the brilliant architect of Pearl Harbor, knew better. He had lived in the United States. He understood its industrial power, its spirit, and its resolve. But his warnings were ignored. The High Command in Tokyo wanted one more strike. One final blow to finish the United States once and for all. That strike would be aimed at a small, remote atoll in the middle of the Pacific Ocean, a ring of coral and sand called Midway. By capturing Midway, Japan could push its defenses eastward, threaten Hawaii, and lure the remaining American carriers into a trap. It was bold, it was risky, and it would change the course of the entire war. As Japan prepared its massive operation, 4 of its most powerful aircraft carriers assembled: Akagi, Kaga, Soryu, and Hiryu. Each one a floating fortress, carrying more than 70 aircraft, and crews hardened by victory at Pearl Harbor and the Indian Ocean. Their target, to wipe out America's remaining naval strength, their confidence, absolute. What they did not know was that America had already cracked Japan's secret naval code. Through tireless work by U.S. cryptographers at Station Hypo in Hawaii, Admiral Chester Nimitz knew exactly what Japan planned to do, and when. For the first time in the war, America would not react. It would strike first. In late May 1942, the American fleet began to move. 3 aircraft carriers, Enterprise, Hornet, and Yorktown, headed toward Midway under the command of Admiral Raymond Spruance and Frank Jack Fletcher. The Yorktown was still damaged from the Battle of the Coral Sea, but U.S. engineers repaired her in just 72 hours. A feat that stunned even her own crew. America was learning to fight a new kind of war, one of speed, precision, and courage. On June 3rd, a PBY Catalina patrol plane spotted the Japanese fleet approaching from the northwest. The message flashed through the air: "Enemy carrier sighted." At that moment, the greatest naval ambush in history was about to begin. At dawn on June 4th, Japan launched the first strike. Dozens of planes roared toward Midway Island, bombs falling like thunder across the runways. The small U.S. garrison fought back fiercely, anti-aircraft guns filling the sky with fire and smoke. The Japanese pilots reported heavy damage. But Midway's airfield still stood. And as they turned back to their carriers to rearm for another wave, something unexpected happened. The Americans were already coming for them. From the decks of Enterprise, Hornet, and Yorktown, waves of dive bombers and torpedo planes began to launch. Their mission was clear: find the Japanese carriers and destroy them before they could strike again. But the U.S. torpedo squadron suffered terribly. Flying low and slow, they were easy targets for Japanese Zero fighters. Plane after plane went down in flames, their crews never making it to their target. It was a massacre. Entire squadrons were wiped out, and yet their sacrifice would soon turn the tide of battle. At that exact moment, high above the ocean, a group of dauntless dive bombers from the Enterprise appeared, guided not by radar, but by luck, instinct, and courage. They arrived over the Japanese fleet just as the enemy was refueling and rearming its planes. Decks were covered in bombs, torpedoes, and fuel hoses. One spark, one hit, could ignite an inferno. And that's exactly what happened next. The first dauntless pilot pushed his nose down into a steep dive. Wind screamed past his canopy as he aimed at the carrier Kaga. Bombs released, and seconds later, the ship erupted into a towering fireball. Another dive bomber struck Akagi, the flagship of Admiral Nagumo. Within minutes, both ships were engulfed in flames, their decks littered with wreckage, their crews scrambling to survive. In a matter of moments, 2 of Japan's most powerful carriers were fatally hit. But the assault wasn't over. From another direction, bombers from the Yorktown found Soryu, scoring 3 direct hits. Explosions tore through her hangars, and within half an hour, she too was lost. 3 carriers, burning, sinking, dying. The pride of Japan's navy, gone in less than 5 minutes. As the surviving ships tried desperately to recover aircraft and rescue men from the sea, Admiral Nagumo faced the unimaginable. Everything he had built, everything Japan had planned, was collapsing before his eyes. But Japan wasn't finished yet. One last carrier, Hiryu, remained, and as the smoke rose across the Pacific, she prepared to strike back. Smoke still curled across the Pacific sky. 3 of Japan's proudest carriers, Akagi, Kaga, and Soryu, were gone. Thousands of sailors floated helplessly in oil-black water, watching the horizon burn, but far to the north, one ship still lived. Hiryu, the last surviving carrier of Admiral Nagumo's striking force. Her decks were filled with fury and disbelief. Japan's pilots, hardened by Pearl Harbor and the Coral Sea, refused to accept defeat. They would fight until the last plane, the last man, the last breath. Within minutes, Hiryu's crew prepared a counterattack. 40 aircraft, dive bombers, and torpedo planes were armed, fueled, and launched into the blazing afternoon sky. Their target, the American carrier Yorktown. High above the ocean, the Japanese pilots found her. White wakes sliced the blue water as Yorktown turned sharply, anti-aircraft guns roaring. Shells exploded in the sky, but the enemy came on like a swarm of hornets. Then, impact. A bomb punched through her flight deck, erupting in a column of flame. A torpedo slammed into her hull. The mighty Yorktown shuddered, leaning heavily to one side. But her crew refused to abandon ship. Damage control teams fought the inferno for hours, pumping water, sealing compartments, turning chaos into order. By afternoon, she was still afloat, battered but alive. Admiral Fletcher, aboard the Yorktown, sent word to Nimitz, "We can still fight." Those words carried the spirit of America itself, wounded but unbroken. Yet the Japanese weren't done. A second wave from Hiryu struck again, catching the Yorktown as she limped along. 2 torpedoes tore into her side. The decks buckled, the lights died. This time, she could not be saved. The order was given. Abandon ship. Men climbed down ropes into the dark sea, the great carrier slowly rolling over, her flags still flying. For a moment, it seemed as if Japan had struck back, but the price was coming. While Hiryu's planes attacked, American scout bombers had already found her. From the decks of Enterprise and Hornet, another wave of dauntless dive bombers rose into the evening sky. The sun hung low, painting the ocean blood red. At 5 p.m., they spotted her, Hiryu steaming alone, her decks crowded with planes being refueled for a third strike. The lead pilot rolled his plane into a dive. Wind howled. Bombs dropped. Explosions tore through the flight deck. Fire spread like lightning. Within minutes, Hiryu was a floating inferno. Flames reached hundreds of feet into the sky. Her captain ordered the crew to abandon ship. The last of Japan's carriers slipped beneath the waves, her hull groaning as the sea swallowed her whole. In one day, June 4th, 1942, Japan had lost 4 aircraft carriers, hundreds of aircraft, and more than 3,000 men. The heart of its naval power was gone. Never again would the Japanese Navy take the offensive. Across the ocean, in the quiet halls of Washington, Admiral Nimitz received the message, AF, Midway, remains in American hands. He smiled for the first time in months. The tide of war had turned. In Tokyo, the news came like a funeral bell. Government censors tried to hide the truth, but word spread through whispers. Mothers and wives wept in silence. The invincible Navy was no more. Admiral Yamamoto, the man who had planned Pearl Harbor, sat alone in his cabin that night, staring into the dark. He understood what had happened. That Japan's fate had been sealed not in a day, but in the moment arrogance blinded wisdom. He had warned his superiors before the war, "I can run wild for 6 months. After that, I have no expectation of success." It had been exactly 6 months since Pearl Harbor. The survivors of Midway were rescued days later. Some Japanese sailors, burned and broken, were pulled from the sea by American destroyers. Many cried when they realized they were being saved, not executed. The Americans treated them with honor. Food, blankets, medical aid. In their enemy, they saw not monsters, but men. Young men who had fought bravely, just as they had. The wrecks of Akagi, Kaga, Soryu, and Hiryu rest now beneath the Pacific, silent monuments to the battle that changed everything. For Japan, Midway marked the beginning of the end. Its navy never recovered. From that moment forward, the rising sun began to fade. For America, it was rebirth. The same nation that had been bloodied at Pearl Harbor had stood, fought, and triumphed. Courage, sacrifice, and intelligence had turned the impossible into victory. When the smoke cleared over Midway, the ocean was quiet again. But beneath that quiet, the balance of the world had shifted. The Pacific, once ruled by Japan, now belonged to a new power. One that would push across every island, one that would never stop until the war was won. And as the sun set over the endless sea, the men who survived looked toward the horizon, their eyes filled not with triumph, but with the memory of all who had fallen, American and Japanese alike. Because in war, victory always comes at a cost. This was the Battle of Midway, the turning point of World War II,